Hey everybody, and welcome back to another RCT2 review, and the first review of 2021. If you have been following the channel for a little while, you know I have a pretty big backlog of parks that I want to cover as reviews, but of course, as all things do, they have slowed down, and these reviews have become a little bit more infrequent just based on all of the other things that I'm doing. So we're a little bit out of order here, but I wanted to feature this park because, in my opinion, it has some of the best coasters that were done last year, and I think it's really worth looking at. This is Silver Lake Amusement Park by Maverix. This is a gold-winning park on New Element, and it's sort of like an American take on Fuji Q Highland in Japan. If you're familiar with Fuji Q, it has some pretty impressive coasters, albeit some low-capacity operational challenged ones, but still pretty interesting. So the idea with this park was to take a Fuji Q Highland type lineup and apply it to sort of an American realistic type park. So let's jump on in. Here is our nice little understated entrance with our logo here, the S, L, A, and P in there with the waterfall. Not too much color, but kind of a clean, modern entrance. Sort of feels like maybe a newer Cedar Fair entrance that you might expect. Lots of nice colored flowers, your go-karts used as the strollers, and we jump on in. Now, the architecture is a little simple along the front promenade here. It's kind of alpine-esque, I suppose. A lot of nice roof overhangs, a lot of nice variety of colors also. Like I said, relatively simple, but all the details are there. So we've got all the stuff inside. That's kind of the one big thing for me when I look at realistic park architecture and things like that. Seeing the t-shirt stands here and seeing the little merchandise units and all that sort of thing definitely helps to drive home that realistic design or overall look for the park. So right at the end of the midway here, we have a custom swings ride, which you can find a tutorial to how to build this one in my hacking tutorial channel. I like the rainbow motif, which carries through the whole park. So here's some nice flowers that go from purple all the way over to red here. Let's hang a left, and we'll start going in this direction. So on the one side here, we have the Hammerhead. So this is a Chance Rides swinging ship. Nice little custom ride here also. And on the corner here, we've got a double S&S tower, so super shot on the one side and power drop on the other. We've got the air canisters here on the side, a typical detail for S&S. I like that they're flanked here on all three sides by kind of a screening fence, so the guests aren't really going to see that until they're well up in the air. But if we wrap around the backside here, we go under this nice little pergola type structure with some plants growing on it and into the kids area in the park. So a couple little circle rides here. This one with a tree around it. This one's got balloons. This is Henry Hopper. This one is Lucy Ladybug. So I like all the cute little names. Timmy Twister, little Zamperla Family Gravity Coaster here also. And then just a couple of food stalls and other things like that around a nice little lake. Also have a go-kart track in here. And one of the nice little details here are all the markings for a future coaster, which we have to wonder, well, what could it be? There's a clue, which we'll get to a little bit later on here, but I do also really like the netting here that goes over top where the big B&M coaster above travels across. There's also some nice details here in that the pit lane is a separate lane from the actual track itself. This is another hack that you can find in my hacking tutorial section on the YouTube channel. So feel free to check that out. This building here, the Southern Comfort little eatery, I think is one of the better pieces of architecture on the map. I do really like this kind of chimney-looking brick structure on the side, this steep red roof. That red looks really nice with the wood, I think. It's definitely a good look. And it frames nicely up against Corkscrew. This is the first coaster in the park, according to the timeline. So 1989. Really like this diagonal entrance underneath that second Corkscrew. We've got the old school a transfer track design on the front here before we get to the lift hill. This is a tough ride to recreate in the game just because you have the corkscrews that are on the grid system, so they can't really go diagonal like you would want them to be. So instead, we're kind of stick this kind of way out and then circle it back. So I think this is a fair attempt at doing this. 6-car train, which is what the earlier ones were before they were often 7 cars. But it looks nice, I think. A nice, simple, understated station. Kind of feels like what you would expect for this kind of ride. I do like the use of the steeplechase track back here for the fencing, so all the stacked track throughout. We go as we corkscrew through up and over the pathway there. Definitely a nice touch, for sure. And single train running there, and then we have the second over here on the transfer track. So let's jump back over to this side. A nice detail of the smoking peep object there in the smoking zone. So this is one of the bigger rides in the park. This is Champion, B&M in 2005. One of the cool things at the entrance here that you can't really see because of the coaster is these 3 bars. You have gold, silver, and bronze. I think is a neat way to theme the coaster. So the actual trains here are also gold, silver, and bronze. And this is a cool layout. We just had a New Element Grand Tour round where the object was to build a coaster that was 2,000 meters long. Well, this one almost hits it. This is 6,100 feet long, but it doesn't necessarily feel overly long, and the pacing is actually very good. It's sort of an older school B&M design. You can tell there's a lot more supports on the lift. It's a 30-degree lift hill, and we got the nice long pre-drop there. But more of a Raging Bull style B&M Hyper, so a lot more corners here, but we got that nice floater airtime hill there. Second turnaround back underneath the lift hill. Another nice floater into this helix turnaround. We change angles here, we can see another floater. So I kind of like how it's sort of turnaround, floating hill, turnaround, floating hill, turnaround, floating hill. We hit the mid-course brakes at just the right amount of time, so it will clear this out before the next one is off the lift. A little airtime hill there. Wrap around the first drop, up and over. And then a final helix to bring it in. So not quite as long on the second half, but I think that's totally acceptable. That feels about where we are on these kind of things. Modern-ish type station definitely has that Cedar Fair type feel to it. 3 transfer bays here also, and a nice, pretty detailed transfer track. A nice little warehouse building back here also, and if you go through, we can see our little hint here, 2021 RMC track. So coming soon, and now that it's implemented into the game, maybe we can get an update to this. So hint, hint, it might be something to see in the future. All right, so jumping back to the other side, we're going to hit our third coaster here. This is Bigfoot, and this one I really, really like. This has Boulder Dash vibes to it. Boulder Dash is up at Lake Compounce in Connecticut, here in the U.S., and it kind of goes off into the woods and has a really long out and back layout. And this one just absolutely hauls through the layout and maintains speed really, really well. We're going to come off the lift hill into this tunnel here, which I do appreciate because I don't think we see enough themed tunnels, not underground tunnels, but themed tunnels. Slowly creeping around to our first drop here. And you'll notice after a pretty substantial lift hill, we've dropped less than halfway down. We've got all these nice little airtime hills through here. All that typical CCI underbanking that you would expect over this waterfall element. And then we have our turnaround here, which is a great drop down towards the water, almost reminiscent of like Big Bad Wolf. Double up right there, really hauling now. Get in this open tunnel and then another enclosed tunnel here, a couple airtime hills, and then back up and into the brakes at 42 miles per hour. So holding its speed really, really well. Definitely a cool looking ride. This is a neat layout for kind of as simple and straightforward as it is. It's executed really well. I love how it's just kind of buried in the woods. I think this landscaping is great, just super thick, lush foliage all kind of blends together in the same color palette. Just looks really nice. We jump back over to our park now. We've got a couple of stands along here, a couple standard rides. Nice big size Ferris wheel here. This is the giant wheel, their chance type thing. Definitely that Japanese type inspiration. And then our log flume right over here. This one is an old Arrow log flume, so coming up underneath of the wooden coaster here, or I suppose the wooden coaster goes over it because this log flume came first. Nice two covered drops, which I kind of appreciate here. I do like the way that this tunnel is done with the mine train track on top, wrapping around with a nice little drop here, some themed elements, a little bit of rock work there in our back of house area. Hard for the guests to see, so that's a little bit of a shame that they can't really see back here. I guess you get a good view from the Ferris wheel, but you can still at least see the splashdown with this great deck along the water. The deck is also good here for the fireworks display. So now let's get into sort of what I'd say the second half of the park. So we've got this really great kind of Festiles Hall in here. And actually, if we do the cutaway view, I think we can get a pretty good look in here. Actually, all the major interiors are done in this park, which is a super cool detail there. So you can see all the different food stands within here. And you can come back and you can see some of the other food stands throughout. Also, definitely cutaway view used to advantage. It's one of those things where I don't think you can really bank on people looking unless, you know, they're just almost screwing around. But I think it's a really cool detail to have, and I appreciate that it's there. So because he had the objects to do it, definitely worth doing, I think. So a couple little food stalls in there, and actually, if you look around at some of the different details in the park, there is a food festival going on. So it's got this sort of overlay of different stalls and things. So look, here's this food truck row where you have a bunch of different little food trucks here. Here's a bunch of different stands around, and if you mouse over, you can see that there's different beers in each one of these little stands. So a pretty cool event overlay, kind of taking shades from Joppy's Everland Park, where he had the Halloween event overlay. So this is a pretty cool like food and wine festival almost. Okay, so we're continuing across and we get to two more coasters, and these are probably the more interesting coasters just because they're more unique, I suppose. Let's take a look at this one. This is our S&S thrust air coaster. This is Railgun. We're waiting for passengers here in the station before we get ready to take off. Our long launch tunnel here. This is taken from Dododumpa at Fuji Q. Great airtime hill right out of the launch, cruising through here 72 miles an hour, and then up and over our top hat just barely, and around into the brakes as we wrap down and around in. You can also see this nice custom train that Space K made. You can download that on New Element. I did a recent Angelic Amusement Academy stream that also featured that, so you can also check it out there. Nice little detail here. We have the Railgun loop spine, which hints at a future loop, potentially to replace the big top hat spike here, which is the real thing that happened at Fuji Q also. This was replaced with a big loop, a little bit to my disappointment. I kind of would have liked to have had the spike instead. But so it goes. Continuing along, we've got a nice Scream and Swing right here, another nice custom ride. I also show how to do this one in my hacking tutorial series, albeit it's one of the ones that is a little bit larger, so it uses the 8 across custom vertical drop trains. A couple more standard rides here, and then if we spin around, we've got this cool ride Hypnosis here, which I just like all the different clocks. I think that's kind of a neat thing. This is another Space K special with the disco train. All right, and then our last coaster over here that we get to is X Sanity, which is the takeoff of Ajanika, also at Fuji Q, an S&S Arrow 4D coaster. And this thing is absolutely massive, but I think I would hazard to say it's one of the best ones that I've seen done in the game as of yet. Because the supports are on point, they're really well done, super beefy, but done well. He's got the seat rotations in there. And the layout's pretty good too. It's more or less a similar thing to what Ijanika has done, but I think it's done very well. Also spanning the roadway down here, so lots of those sorts of details that are just nice and good to have. Our flat corner up here. 4D coasters are hard. They're really difficult in the game. They're one of the more difficult rides to do, I think, but Maverix has done a pretty nice job here. The station itself is one giant box and it is kind of ugly until you go look at Ijanika's station, which is exactly like this. It looks totally the same. I also kind of like the detail here where we have the nice manicured grass outside the ride restricted area, and then inside there's a couple of weeds and things that have grown just because it's a little bit more of a pain to get in there and cut it down since the ride's operating, of course. So the last bit here is actually a whole water park, so it's got a separate entrance here that the guests can come in on. Nice huge wave pool here, a couple of cabanas throughout, and then we have a new mat racer here coming for next year. I love the cement truck. Love some of the details here. Our pumper truck going in, the formwork for the actual slab here, and then all just the different details. Maverix has worked at a real theme park in construction, and so he's got all that sort of inside knowledge for how to do these things. So it's definitely a great exercise in realistic details. So we have a couple of nice little slides here with the bobsled track so we can get a proper helix. I think that's one of the things our tracks our water slides lose a little bit, is that they don't have those sorts of helix pieces. Hopefully that can be a custom ride, maybe in an eventual update perhaps, or something, custom ride maybe. A nice family raft ride here with the big family tubes and the steep lift hill. We do have a water coaster over here. Or somewhat questionably shaped water coaster with a lot of nice kind of standard hills, very pro slide-esque, kind of a cover across as well through the whole thing. So I think this is a nice detail. I do like the support work. The whole thing's up and over top of the pathway, so it definitely kind of looks like it came in maybe a little bit later. And who knows, maybe they had to modify this around it. I don't know if it says when this came in. 2000, and this came in 2002. So this was here first. So then the coaster actually had to work around that instead. And then finally, there's one more slide over here. Points though that every slide works. Every slide has peeps on it. We even have a surf rider here, which I think is a pretty cool detail as well. And then of course the lazy river around the nice steep drop slide on that side. So there's a lot of stuff to look at here. I think on the whole, this is a really, really strong park. Definitely has the, I guess you could call it dirty American realism going on, although the park itself is pretty clean, very gray, which I think is expected of this kind of a park, and that's what I'm looking for. But I also like the decisions to make the coasters a little more, I don't know, Japanese-esque as far as color goes. So it's a little more, not necessarily drab colors, but you have your black, your reds, your whites over here. So there's definitely less kind of bright in your face Six Flags-esque colors. But I think that's an okay thing to have. The coasters all are very strong. I love Bigfoot here. I think Champion is a really, really solid layout, especially for the length of the ride and how well it keeps up its pacing. This Arrow coaster is just a nice, solid version of this kind of layout. 100 different versions out there for a pretty simple overall coaster, and I think this one's definitely done well. And then the same thing with both the SNS and the 4D coaster here. You don't see these very often, so I think it's a treat to actually see one and to see it done really well. Definitely shows that there's been some research here, especially support work and all that. This park was cranked out fast. I think Maverix started this in the springtime, and it was out by the fall. So definitely an impressively large park for the work that went into it, and definitely has a lot of cool stuff with it. Love all the details of the back of house kind of stuff here, all along the front of house here, but screened nicely. We have our fence here that has all the kind of grass growing up in it. And here you have your sign out front with the Craft Beer Fest 2020 and all the rainbow flowers here continuing on. So just lots of those little details to see. I think that's kind of my favorite thing about these parks, when you can keep searching and keep seeing all sorts of different things, and you pick up new stuff every time you look at it. There's just a lot of stuff to look at and to see and to look closely at. So worth your while, I think, to download the park and spend a little time just exploring it and just watching it. I think there's something to be said about properly peepable parks that, you know, guests can wander and explore, and I just think it's fun to still watch the peeps go ride stuff. I mean, after all, that's kind of what the game's about. So definitely one of my favorite parks of 2020, and I hope that we will see some more parks like this, and maybe from Maverix himself. So I guess we'll see, but this is our first review of 2020, of plenty more to come, hopefully. But definitely check out this park. I'll put the download in the description. And if you have any comments or requests for future park reviews, feel free to let me know in the comments. And we will continue with this, Angelic Amusement Academy, hacking tutorials, and all sorts of other stuff here in the future. So thank you guys very much for watching, and have a great day.